Streaming live on the KREF app.
The Ref Sports Radio Network.
Live from the Buffalo Wild Wings studios, it's time to get locked into the best Sooner recruiting and football news with Parker Thune and Grayson Singleton.
You better lock it up. No, you lock it up. You lock it up. Lock it up.
Hit the guys up on the Riverwind Casino call-in line at 405-329-9000. Or text the show on the Knippelmeyer Chevrolet text line at 405-651-3439.
Do it! Just do it!
Now, with Locked In, here's Parker Thune and Grayson Singleton.
All right, let's go. One show till the weekend. It should be an eventful weekend in the Oklahoma recruiting space. The Sooners do appear poised to add commitment number 16 tomorrow, Grayson Singleton, in the form of four-star safety Jacob Eberhart from Kirkwood, Missouri, which is a suburb of St. Louis, for those unfamiliar. Set to decide tomorrow between Oklahoma, Alabama, Missouri, Illinois, and Nebraska. 6'3", 215 pounds, very much fits the mold of that hyper-athletic, plus-size safety that Oklahoma has, and Brandon Hall has demonstrated that they really prefer in past cycles. Guys like Robert Spears-Jennings and Michael Boganowski come readily to mind. Well, it looks like Jacob Eberhart is going to be next. We will talk about his pending commitment and the implications thereof later on in the show. But here's where I want to start on this Friday afternoon, Grayson. I want to start with the Jim Nagy discourse, because this conversation continues to percolate on social media, and if you listen to goons like Jeff Ketchum weigh in on the Nagy philosophy, which, by the way, folks, engage with Jeff Ketchum at your own peril. Or better advice might just be not to engage with Jeff Ketchum, because it's all bait from him. By engaging, you're giving him exactly what he wants. But outside of Jeff Ketchum, there are many others, including Chris Phillips of SEC Unfiltered, and we referenced this in the 12 o'clock hour as well. But Chris Phillips of SEC Unfiltered was on Twitter today saying he doesn't necessarily, not a big believer that Jim Nagy's strategy can work in the SEC as he articulated it. And what this boils down to, Grayson, is I think there are a ton of misconceptions that continue to get tossed around with regard to the Nagy philosophy. And I want to start with a text from the super secret Textoso line. I had a listener hit me up about 10 minutes ago as we were wrapping up Steelman and Thune at noon. And he said, I think next hour you need to again reiterate what Jim said in his comments. LOL, people are stupid. He went on to say, I get how Jim's 5 stars versus 3 stars comment came off. But what he's saying is, internally, we have them rated the same. Externally, sites like On3 Arrivals don't. He's not picking the quote-unquote worse player to save money. He's trusting their evals over the industry consensus. And that is what has gotten lost in translation for so many folks, I think, when they hear Jim Nagy articulate everything that he put out there on the Triple Option podcast last week with Rob Stone and Urban Meyer and Mark Ingram. They hear Jim Nagy say, well, you know, if we have the same grade on a 5-star and a 3-star, we're going to go after the 3-star more than likely because they're going to come at a cheaper price point. And people hear that and they think, well, you're just trying to save money, even if it comes at the detriment of the roster. But no, again, what it all boils down to is that Jim Nagy, who's been working in NFL front offices since the mid-90s, is willing to bet on his own eyes as opposed to someone else's. As I have pointed out many a time, why do you need Jim Nagy if you trust the industry rankings? And if the industry rankings tell you everything you need to know about a given player, there's absolutely no reason at that point to pay your general manager $600,000 a year to head up your personnel, evaluation, scouting, recruiting for your football program.
The operative word here is NFL. And the concept that we're discussing
is actually articulated very well by certain people. Those people have always been the Todd McShays, the Daniel Jeremiahs, the Mel Kiper Jr.'s of the world. Because when NFL draft time comes around, what you just laid out, they might be this according to the industry, but here's how it's stacked up on the board. That is language that is used throughout the NFL draft process.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's being translated over. The reason why this is getting lost in translation is because this is a new thing to college athletics. And to see how publicly that the evaluation boards are now discussed is a little bit new. So, in a way, it almost was inevitable that we have this discourse. Because for so long, the only evaluations that were available to most of us that we ever got any kind of a peek behind the curtain at were the star ratings, right? So that's what people are used to gauging the guys you're going after versus the teams you're going against for those guys. So in a way, like I understand how this conversation has taken the turn that it has. But I think now what we need to shift to, because the financials have such a big part in this, what we have to shift to now is the word overpay. And that is what good management never does. Good management doesn't overpay. And what it seems like right now, be it if Jim Nagy comes off as somewhat conservative with his evaluations and the guys that he decides to pursue in these high school classes, what you could almost rest assured, guaranteed, is that Oklahoma's not overpaying for people. And that's where you can get yourself in a sticky situation as an organization. And so it seems that they may not be trying to hit all the home runs and all the sexy home runs that everybody wants them to hit, but what you're not going to do is get yourself in a funky situation by overpaying for somebody. And that, to me, at least is a start avoiding that pitfall.
And it's absolutely one of the biggest pitfalls that professional sports organizations encounter.
No
kidding. The pitfall of dead money.
Yes.
That is the one thing you never want to have is dead money. When you're paying somebody to not play for you or not work for you, consider how much that, even at the college level, how much that hamstrings certain athletic departments. There was a time where the University of Nebraska, for instance, was paying 3 different coaches. They were paying Bo Pelini's buyout. They were paying Mike Riley's buyout. They were paying Scott Frost actively to be their head coach. Texas A&M had to pay something like $70 million to do away with the Jimbo Fisher experience. Oklahoma's very fortunate in that they haven't had to pay a massive buyout of that ilk to any coach in, forever. I think the biggest buyout they've had to pay in recent years is actually Seth Luttrell's buyout, which is in the neighborhood of $3 million. And they're going to continue to pay that off through, I want to say 27, maybe 28. $3 million is a lot of money, objectively speaking. But relative to what an athletic department brings in year over year, not that much. Oklahoma hasn't had to deal with a ton of dead money. And that's the last thing, if you're running an organization at any level, that's the last thing you want to have to deal with, is essentially throwing money into the wind, getting zero return on investment because you made a bad investment. And Grayson, this right here, and by the way, that same texter on the super secret Textoso line followed up and said, they don't even use a star system internally. It's a color-coded system, which Nagy referenced in the interview, and pointed out they had Deacon Schmidt ranked as a better prospect than Felix Ojo. And again, it's one of the things that when you find that out, and I think it's surprising, right? Felix Ojo's a 5-star. Deacon Schmidt is a borderline 4-star guy. But it certainly surprised people back in April during the NFL draft when Dylan Gabriel got selected before Shedeur Sanders did. Right? And so at that point, the moral of the story there is you better be right. Your eval better be on the money. Deacon Schmidt better turn out to be a better player than Felix Ojo, at least relative to what you invested in him.
That's fair. Now, do I think that Deacon Schmidt has to be head and shoulders a better player than Felix Ojo to validate that evaluation? No. I don't. But he can't be seismically worse. Now, were you ever going to go to the table in a bidding war with Texas Tech with the figures that the Red Raiders gave Felix Ojo? Probably not. You probably weren't going to pay that lump sum of money. But you do have to, if you take the guy that everybody has below the other guy, that dude needs to be in the same stratosphere at the end of his development, at the end of the tenure, then as the same guy. Otherwise, that's when people start looking at you sideways.
Now, on this note, I want to talk about a fascinating dynamic that's playing out right now in the 2026 recruiting cycle. What is dominating the news cycle across college athletics right now? It's the SCORE Act.
Yes.
That is the biggest news of the week across college athletics, is the introduction, I should say, of the SCORE Act and the potential that could be passed. Will it? I don't know. I have a lot of feelings on that bill and the political implications and feelings on the sides of both parties that we just don't have nearly enough time to dive into. But when you look through the SCORE Act, and we talked about it earlier in the week, Grayson, when you look through the SCORE Act, one thing that becomes clear is that if it does get passed, we are done with the Wild West era of college athletics.
Yeah.
Everything is getting reined in very decisively and very immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot that's swirling at the legislative level right now, not just the SCORE Act, but obviously there are so many things right now at the absolute highest levels, not just of collegiate athletics, but of the government, that have the potential to drastically shift the entire landscape within the next several months. And so one of the things that has been happening over the last several months is that there are certain programs that have basically said, hey, we're going to make sure we're taking advantage of the quote-unquote Wild West as long as we possibly can. And we're going to set ourselves up such that if at any point the Wild West goes away, we already squeezed the most juice out of the proverbial orange that we could. Now, here's what that has meant practically for some programs. And I'm sure I don't even need to name a few of the specific programs that will come to mind for folks when I explain what's going on. There are certain programs that have drastically front-loaded their NIL offerings to recruits across the country in the 26 cycle. Elite recruits, mostly but not exclusively. And there are teams that have ensured that they've already gotten the majority of their payout prior to July 1st. So they already have money sitting in the bank as of June. That obviously the implication is that, hey, you're going to not only commit to but sign with our institution. You're going to play college football here. But we're going to front load your money so that we can make sure we get you the most cash in your pocket, and this doesn't have the opportunity to take a big chunk out of your pay if there is additional structure introduced within the coming months that limits your earning potential. And so when you look at some of the programs that have built really solid recruiting classes to this point in the 26 cycle, not saying it's that way across the board, but there's a lot of that has played into it, particularly some of the early commitment decisions from many of the more high-profile recruits in the 2026 cycle. Here's where this becomes important and worth considering from the Oklahoma perspective, is that when we look at what has happened for OU so far in the 26 cycle, they have not forked over obscene money for any prospect as of yet. They do have some very solid additions. They have some very solid components in their 2026 cycle to date. They should add another one tomorrow in Jacob Eberhart. But Oklahoma has also finished second for a lot of dudes over the last month or so in particular. finishing second means more in this era than it ever has before, Grayson. Because what happens, I'm not saying this is the case across the board. I'm not saying this is the case for every individual recruit that committed somewhere other than Oklahoma, but I know for a fact it's played into several decisions in which a school beat out Oklahoma narrowly for a given recruit. What happens if and when, and we're speaking in hypotheticals here because we don't necessarily know what the future looks like at the legislative level with the SCORE Act and all of these potential solutions that could impact the monetary structure and the earning potential for student athletes, particularly in college football. What happens if at some point, via legislation or otherwise, a student athlete realizes that in the long run, he's not going to get as much money to play football at the institution to which he committed as he imagined he would when he committed to that institution? Whether he changes his mind or not, at that point, he's going to reevaluate everything. He's going to reevaluate everything about the process. Could that work in Oklahoma's favor with some of these recruitments that have seemingly already been decided in the 2026 class? I mean, this is why they say it ain't over until the ink's dry. And Oklahoma, quite notably in recent years, has not been a program that has played the villain on the trail and been a popular flip destination for prospects committed elsewhere. But I genuinely think there's the possibility that Oklahoma this fall, if things go a certain way at the governmental level, there's potential that Oklahoma could be on the receiving end of several high-profile flips.
Okay, so a couple of things I know we're up against, and so I'll make this quick. Number one, I've read through Ross Dellinger's litany of tweets describing the SCORE Act. There's a lot to like about the SCORE Act. There's a lot that I don't like. That's what's in the bill, but that's a different topic for another segment. Oklahoma becomes the beneficiary, potentially, and I'm going to sound like a broken record because I feel like we've said this every single day this week. If you win games, if they win games, they become maybe the hottest team to watch when it comes to flip time. If what you just laid out comes to fruition and Oklahoma is winning games and it looks like the coaching staff's job security has been solidified, Oklahoma, I think, becomes a very popular flip destination. If they don't, then that's all null and void. But if you win games, I think there could be a much higher payout for that than we otherwise would think.
Because, for instance, let's just operate under the assumption that the SCORE Act gets passed. If the SCORE Act is codified into law, whereas in years past you have seen many high-profile flips happen because of money, you're going to start seeing high-profile flips happen because of the absence of money. At least the absence of the type of money that a given student-athlete thought he was going to get or she was going to get at a particular institution. And so it restores a sense of hierarchy to the recruiting process, such that it's probably no longer going to be the case that you see recruits choosing schools like, just to pick a few examples here, places that high-profile athletes have chosen to commit recently. It's less likely that you'll see guys choosing Houston and Texas Tech and Maryland over the traditional brands in the sport. Schools like Oklahoma and LSU and Alabama and Georgia. Shoot, you'd have to think it negatively impacts a school like Oregon, even though they have also been quite successful in recent years. They've made a lot happen with money. If the SCORE Act gets passed, universities are going to be able to make less happen with just the monetary factor, and that plays to the advantage of programs like Oklahoma. Not just Oklahoma, but OU is certainly one of those schools that stands to benefit from it.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, folks, 405-651-3439 is the Knippelmeyer Chevrolet text line. Much to discuss with the remainder of the show, and we will do so starting with your texts. Coming up next here on Locked In, you're listening to The Ref, the home of Sooner fans.
Feeling stuck in your current home? Now is the best time to make a move. Home Creations is making home ownership more affordable with low interest rate opportunities and special financing. Don't wait. Live like a champion today. Call Holly at 405-364-9999 to find your dream home.
364-9999 means Home Creations.
Attention construction pros. Purple Wave Auction brings quality equipment to your fingertips. Join our bi-weekly online auctions featuring dozers, excavators, loaders, and more. We provide detailed listings, photos, and seller contact info. Inspect online or in person. With our no reserve policy, every item sells to the highest bidder. Visit purplewave.com today and see why informed builders choose Purple Wave. Transparent processes, real deals, your next great purchase awaits. purplewave.com.
At Armstrong Bank, your business isn't just business to us, it's personal. Our bankers are invested in your success, and we're ready to build a relationship that lasts. You deserve a strong financial partner by your side. Together, we can help make your business even stronger with products and services designed for your convenience. To learn more, visit a location near you or visit armstrong.bank. Armstrong Bank, strength runs in our family. Member FDIC.
Whether it's yesterday, today, or tomorrow, no one covers the Sooners like we do. From the voice of the Sooners on The Rush every day for the triple option.
We've landed on the triple option, and I'm excited.
To the Plank Show, taking over your morning drive from 6 to 9.
Every single radio person, what they want to do is they want to do a morning show.
And the addition of Darinoka from 9 to noon.
The importance of sports in the SEC, and it's no different at OU. It's a special place to be, man.
The Ref Sports Radio Network.
A happy place comes in many colors. One that leaves you feeling refreshed. Something that gets you all fired up. Or gives you the space to chill. Whatever your color, bring happiness home with CertaPro Painters and make your happy place your home. CertaPro Painters. That's painting happy. Get started today at CertaPro.com. Each CertaPro Painters business is independently owned and operated. Contractor license and registration information is available at CertaPro.com.
I'm Ben Affleck, and I want to thank you for joining me and supporting Paralyzed Veterans of America.
I joined the Navy to serve my country. While parachuting with my platoon, my parachute didn't open, and I broke my neck.
Thanks to PVA, paralyzed veterans are getting specialized medical care and treatments, the jobs they want, and the accessible vehicles and homes they need.
I just don't think my family would be as happy as they are without the support that I received from Paralyzed Veterans of America.
Learn more at pva.org.
Hi, everybody. Toby Rowland here for one of my favorite places to golf, the Trails Golf Club in Norman. The Trails offers great golf activities for the entire family. Men's and Ladies Golf Association events, summer junior golf for the kids, plus club fittings throughout the year. The Trails also has great family social events, monthly special dinners, plus holiday brunches and catering. When you're looking for the perfect place to golf, check out the Trails Golf Club in Norman. Contact Zane Alexander today at 405-364-3790 or visit trailsgolf.com.
Why did I wait so long to see a retina specialist?
Retinal disease can steal your eyesight, but it doesn't have to. Patients who seek care from a retina specialist have the best chance of preventing vision loss due to age-related macular degeneration or diabetic retinopathy. AMD symptoms to look out for are distortion or warping of straight lines, as well as blurred or loss of central vision. Patients with diabetic retinopathy should seek treatment if they notice the appearance of spots or floaters or blurred and distorted vision. Visit seeforalifetime.org.
Timely and relevant update. Breaking news moments ago. 4-star wide receiver Jordan Clay out of San Antonio, Texas, has committed to Baylor over Oklahoma. And this right here, Grayson, I mentioned the same thing earlier in the week. This right here, I don't know how long Oklahoma is going to play the long game with Jordan Clay, but this right here is like the prototypical case study for everything I just laid out. Because Baylor is, and has been for some time, making stuff happen with money. Because, let's face it, that program doesn't have a ton of momentum, positive or negative. They did get hot towards the end of last season, but they went, 8-5, I believe it was their final record
Something
last
like
year.
That.
Baylor has just kind of settled into mediocrity in the Big 12. That's what they've been under Dave Aranda. Consistently mediocre, with the exception of that 2021 season where they won the Big 12. They won the Big 12 over Oklahoma State.
Because Dominic Richardson couldn't get into the end zone from 1 yard out.
I bet you were in the building for that one.
I was not in the building. I was sick.
Oh.
But I remember watching it.
Fortunately, you were sick. That would have been tough to take, I imagine.
Yeah.
In person.
Yeah.
But that right there is the type of recruitment in which Oklahoma, it would not shock me at all if down the line Jordan Clay was reevaluating his process because Baylor goes 1-3 over the first 4 weeks of the regular season because they have to play Auburn and SMU and Arizona State. And then all of a sudden, you kind of want to rethink things, be understandable to do so. And Oklahoma was right there. Man, finished second. Couldn't quite overcome Baylor. But if Jordan Clay wants to take a second look at any point, and not to mention what the SCORE Act could do to, again, kind of even the playing field as far as the monetary aspect of things and regulate the compensation structure. If all things are truly equal, that could be a guy that you could very realistically foresee flipping to Oklahoma in October to November. I'm not saying you should expect it. I'm not saying it happens, but that is the type of recruitment that you kind of file away, or should kind of file away in your memory, is one to maybe check back in on in a few months and just see where things stand.
And again, we're going to find out a lot about Baylor this season very early. They've got a pretty tough non-conference schedule. One-star Seth and Piedmont, pardon me. If and hopefully when all these things pass and we're finally in the era of fairness with NIL, how fast do we think schools like Oregon return to, at best, like an upper mid-echelon team university?
Okay, Oregon, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah. Number one, like that team's got some momentum behind it.
Yeah, that team played for 2 national championships in the span of 5 years before NIL. Keep that in mind. They played for national titles in 2010 and 2014. They lost both those games. But Oregon was a blooming power in college football before the NIL era, and with Dan Lanning at the helm, they should remain so, regardless of what happens at the governmental level with all of the pending legislation that could pass or might not pass, whatever. It's a school like Texas Tech, where you're like,
that's Exhibit A.
Uh-huh. What is their outlook?
Yes.
Now, here's the thing about Tech, though. Not only have they drastically increased their NIL spending in recent years, but they've also sunk a ton of money into building some of the absolute best facilities in the country. So that is something that's going to enable you to fight high-profile battles in all likelihood. That and winning football games.
And also, facilities and whatnot, making your guys comfortable, that's not regulated by the SCORE Act.
Correct.
Also,
you can spend as much money as you want to on facilities.
Somebody in the YouTube chat said that will also affect SMU. Sorry, Grayson. Well, I'll tell you this. If they keep competing for ACC titles, given that and where they are in the country, SMU could potentially survive an evening out of the playing field. Now, I will say this, though, and I may be the only person who thinks like this because I haven't seen the sentiment on the text line yet, and I know you haven't said anything about it. Maybe you could agree with me.
Okay.
When it comes to evening everything out and stuff like that, is that not basically market restriction? Is that not a restriction of free market?
I mean, yes.
And here's the thing. And if you want to put a de facto salary cap, like that's something similar to what goes on in professional sports, cool. But who's going to regulate if somebody's NIL deals is fair? Because I think there's no way in hell that holds up in court, because that doesn't seem constitutional at all.
Well, again, but part of the detail of the SCORE Act, or one of the details therein, is basically, well, you can't sue the NCAA anymore. They get to do what they want.
Which is a whole other conversation to have, because writing into a law exemptions to another law is the wildest thing I have ever heard conceptually. But you know, I think that's where schools can be undercut, because in a true free market, like what's essentially going on in college football, is a free market, an unregulated free market, which describes 99.9% of everything else that happens in America.
Mm-hmm.
You have these outside NIL deals. Well, people want to say somebody's going here to sign autographs, so they're going to give them X balloon amount of money. Why are we acting like that's not a normal thing amongst public figures? Like, public figures go out and do stuff like that all the time and get exorbitant amounts of dollars. So, again, my whole issue with this whole thing, and yes, there needs to be guardrails and there needs to be structure, which the SCORE Act would provide.
Yes.
Would provide structure. But why are we picking this industry out to undercut free market and to bring in market restrictions? Because celebrities do this all the time. NFL athletes do it all the time. So if we're saying, okay, you guys are going to be professionals, you're kind of contradicting yourself by not allowing them to do professional things that other professional public figures do.
It's a good point. Another fascinating aspect of the SCORE Act that I saw it and I was like, yes, love it. But I know some people won't, especially those in the agent community. Agent earnings from NIL deals are capped at 5%.
To me, what they do with the agents in the SCORE Act is the best part of the act. Because you want to show that you have the player's best interest at heart, and these kids that are 17 about to go into college, you protect them from agents that are trying to charge 20%? That's unheard of.
Oh, and it gets higher. It gets higher.
No, that's unheard of. Like, I think NFL agents only take 7-8%. So what they're doing with the agents, I thought that was my favorite part of the entire bill.
Chunky Chuck says, it's the offseason when we're arguing about free market fairness with political interference. Yes, I never imagined when I got into this business years and years ago that eventually we'd be having such heavily politicized discussions about the future of college athletics. But here we are.
This is why I have my political science minor.
There you go. I considered getting a minor in political science and then decided, you know what? No, I don't want anything to do with politics. Little did I know politics was going to come for me regardless. Where was I going next? What was I pivoting? Oh, yes. So I had a fascinating conversation yesterday with someone on the money side of the whole landscape right now. And that individual told me there are institutions and staffs that are so tired of dealing with agents and handlers, really more handlers than agents, because there are precious few actual agents across college football. There are a lot of guys that call themselves agents, a lot of people that call themselves agents that are really just posers and have no actual qualifications and are just looking for a quick buck. But schools and staffs are so tired with dealing with some of those folks that in some cases, I kid you not, this is happening. There are schools that are paying certain recruits not to hire an agent throughout the recruiting process.
Really?
Yes. Like, hey, we'll give you money. We'll give you X amount of money on a monthly basis until you sign. And part of the stipulation is you don't hire an agent. Because when an agent enters the picture, in most cases, the ask gets a lot higher.
Right. It is easier from the school's perspective to deal one-on-one with the athlete. And maybe in most cases, their parents too.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the I'll go back to our conversation about agents a couple of weeks ago. There's barely enough good agents to take care of the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball. Well, I guess all of those guys are under Scott Boras nowadays.
Pretty much.
What do you think is going to happen in college? The reason why this came in through the text line. Somebody said, so Reformed Sooner said, so now you want to regulate what agents make? Hypocrisy. I don't necessarily want to regulate what agents make. I want to make sure that they're not taking advantage of 17-year-olds. That's the heart of that. And the reality is, guys in the NFL, you're not going to take advantage of them but so much. But if you want to protect the kids, there's no protecting kids. There's no best interest of the kids if you slash how much money they can make. There is protecting them if you could at least put guardrails around who has access to really impacting their financial future.
A verified source on the text line says, Shaka Smart at Marquette has told kids that if they have an agent, he won't recruit them. Shaka Smart W? Question mark?
If they have an agent, they won't. This is also why Jim Nagy's exist, and Michael Lombardi's exist, and whoever else are the other high-profile GMs. Because it shouldn't be a coach's job to negotiate contracts. That's a front office.
Correct. A listener in Wyoming says, here's the only breakdown we need. Absolutely nothing ever gets better when the government gets involved. Amen?
Yeah.
At least as it pertains to college athletics, yes and amen. It's wild that there is such a collision, such a juxtaposition right now between the world of college football and the U.S. government. Imagine convincing anybody a decade ago that we would get to this point. But here we are. A 405 listener says, why someone wouldn't want to hire a counselor when signing a contract is beyond me. Again, it's less about the concept of hiring the counselor and more about the type of people that have proliferated across the quote-unquote agent community, because there are reputable agents out there, guys with the qualifications and the right interests to be dutifully representing these student athletes. And then there are a whole bunch of freeloaders.
Mm-hmm.
A whole bunch. Far more freeloaders than reputable folks.
Can we get to this one last text before
Let's
we
do
go
it.
to break? Dink says, this isn't free market, it's the manipulation of interstate commerce. The kids are not being paid by fair market value, and the IRS can shoot those marketing cost deductions down from companies that offer monies above and beyond what established business norms. Here's my overarching point to the whole fair market thing. Who determines fair market value? Because in every other walk of life, fair market value, isn't that determined by who wants to pay you that? Isn't your value determined by who wants to pay it? That's generally how our society works, right? So if you're artificially, basically what it is, it's just an artificial cap on value. Because if somebody wants to pay it, that's that person's value. And generally how we operate is, whose right is that to say that's not your value? That's clearly your value to somebody, because value is relative.
And can I be frank? If the SCORE Act gets passed and there is regulation instituted and all that, it's not going to regulate everything. What's going to happen is the bag man will return.
And how much of it do you think holds up in court, too?
Frankly, I don't have a clue.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to gauge right now. But I do know the NCAA, the governing bodies across collegiate athletics, administrators, compliance, and the like, they've never been able to 100% regulate the exchange of money.
Oh, yeah.
Between student athletes and, let's call them, invested parties. Parties with a vested interest in the success of a given institution.
I think that's the best way to put that.
The bagman will return. If indeed any sort of regulation eventually becomes established. All right, folks, 405-651-3439. That's the Knippelmeyer Chevrolet text line. So many of you have already chimed in. We will discuss, on the other side, the pending announcement from four-star safety Jacob Eberhart and what he would bring to the table for Oklahoma as perhaps, potentially, hypothetically, the 16th commit of Oklahoma's 2026 class tomorrow. That and more ahead here on Locked In. You're listening to The Ref, the home of Sooner fans.
Bleed Crimson? Love great Sooner talk? Join the Ref Army by downloading our free app. Toby and TJ, Plank and Josh, Steelman and Thune, and Teddy and Tyler. We have the Sooner experts. The Ref is home to Sooner fans worldwide.
Good
Beats and Bites Festival is back again at Riverwind Casino. Dance all night at the I Want My 80s tour on July 19th, featuring Rick Springfield, John Waite, Paul Young, and Wang Chung. Along with crave-worthy eats from local food trucks. Get your tickets online or at the box office for just $10. Only at Riverwind Casino.
Whether you're from out of town or live here year-round, Visit Norman encourages you to shop local this summer. Visit Cayman's on Main Street, your one-stop shopping for men's and women's clothing and accessories, designer jewelry, cosmetics, and home decor. Featuring Peter Millar, Johnny O, Rag & Bone, John Hardy, and much more at Cayman's. Wonderhouse Design and Consign for window covering, upholstery fabric, wallpaper, furniture consignment, and more. Locally owned and operated with a constant rotation of new and unique pieces, Wonderhouse Design and Consign is always worth a stop. Grab some friends and head over to Westwood Family Aquatic Center. Don't wait to grab a season pass for exclusive access to all the summer fun Westwood Family Aquatic Center has to offer. Keep the good times going in Norman all summer when you eat, shop, and play local.
Hi, Teddy Lehman here for Titan Title and Closing. And when I played for OU, I knew I could trust my teammates. And when you're making the biggest decision of your life, like selling or buying your home, you want a team you can trust. That's why you can call my teammate, Devry.
Thanks, Teddy. As one of the partners here in Norman at Titan Title and Closing, I know a thing or two about Norman. I've raised my children here, and I've been in the real estate industry for over 25 years. We work with over 25 entities that are involved in each transaction, and our team plays on both sides of the transaction to achieve a win for our realtors, lenders, builders, sellers, and buyers. When you sell your property, be sure to ask your agent to close with Titan Title and Closing here in Norman. You can contact us today at 405-689-8617. Again, that's 405-689-8617.
Plumbing and air conditioning problems seem to happen at the worst time. Hey, it's Chris Plank here. And a while back when we had a plumbing issue at our home, our first call was to Norman Air. The team at Norman Air was great, from upfront pricing to alerts before the tech arrived. The whole experience from start to finish was great. With financing available to their Max membership and servicing from North Edmond all the way south to Purcell, Norman Air is the go-to for HVAC, plumbing, and electrical issues. Visit normanair.com today. Victory Family Church. It's more than just a church, it's truly a family. And as it continues to grow, you can now celebrate with 6 opportunities every Sunday morning, starting as early as 8:30 a.m. with our final service starting at 1. Learn more about service times and everything going on with Pastor Adam and the church at victoryfamily.church. That's victoryfamily.church. Check out our campuses in Newcastle, Chickasha, and Shawnee. Victory Family Church, online at victoryfamily.church.
Now that open enrollment for healthcare coverage has ended, there's still several options to consider that just might benefit you. Need to purchase your own health insurance? Confused about Medicare? Considering offering benefits to your employees? Call the agents at Allison Insurance, featuring 70-plus years of combined insurance business experience. They're able to help clients avoid mistakes when purchasing individual or group health insurance. Call Allison Insurance at 800-580-5587 or 745-2968. They are the experts.
Oh boy, we have a Doug and Norman text. Doug and Norman says, you continue to attempt to portray the narrative that any recruit that chooses a school other than OU is essentially doing so because of money. First of all, that is totally arrogant. And secondly, maybe, just maybe, there are hundreds and maybe thousands of recruits who don't give a whit about the University of Oklahoma. Oklahoma has the same opportunity to pay these recruits as anybody else, but are choosing not to. That is the priorities that are being established by the Nagy administration. Stop with the narrative that ex-recruit would have chosen the blue blood Oklahoma, but the school they chose won out because they got offered more money. So what? OU has the same opportunity to pay recruits as anyone. Okay, so I'm unclear on what you're trying to say here, Doug. You're trying to say that that's not an accurate narrative, or are you trying to say, so what? Because I agree. Look, end of the day, yeah, so what? Kid took more money to go somewhere else in Oklahoma. That's the game these days. So what happens? If I'm insinuating that money was a major factor in a given recruitment, it's because I know that money was a major factor in a given recruitment. I know what was on the table for Jordan Clay at Baylor. I know what was on the table for Taj Overton at Oklahoma State. I know what was on the table for Tavian Branch at Rutgers. No, Oklahoma doesn't lose every single recruiting battle over money, but in many cases, money is a big part of it. But guess what, Doug? I agree with you. So what? Oklahoma does have the same opportunity to pay recruits as anyone. And in some cases, they do not come to the table with the highest bid. I'm not lamenting that. I'm not decrying that. I'm just discussing that for what it is, reality.
Can I clarify something?
Sure.
Because I'm currently fighting with people in the YouTube chat.
Oh, no.
And I also think something got misunderstood here. My overarching point, and maybe I shouldn't have used the word fair market value. I think that's what is undercutting my point here. But value is a buyer's thing. Chapstick texted in during the break. Buyers set value. And if somebody wants to pay more for something, that's your going price. And my whole point with one of the things that I don't like about the SCORE Act, just one of them, I like a lot about it, but one of the things I don't like is if somebody wants to pay more for somebody, or well, that's a horrible way of phrasing that, if somebody wants to pay more for the services of somebody, then you should be able to do so. Because that's generally how everything else in our society works. Hopefully that clarifies that up a little bit.
Hopefully. We'll see. We'll see what the YouTube chatsters have to say. But as we kind of shift gears here, I don't want to go the whole hour without talking about Jacob Eberhart because he is scheduled to commit tomorrow. This would be a big pickup for Oklahoma, a consequential pickup for Oklahoma if indeed they land him, as is the expectation across the industry right now. Eberhart, 6'3", 215 pounds, Kirkwood, Missouri, has a lot of wide receiver film when you look at his junior tape.
Mm-hmm.
More offensive tape than he does have defensive tape. But what becomes apparent is this is just a dude that's really big, really fast, really athletic, has all of the traits that you look for in a big-time free safety at the next level, or even a linebacker at the next level. He's big enough that you could envision a world in which he winds up at linebacker, but Oklahoma prefers him at safety. They want to get him to campus. They want him to be next in line behind Robert Spears-Jennings and Michael Boganowski. You've seen the tape on Jacob Eberhart.
Mm-hmm.
Where does this rank for you if indeed Oklahoma can pull it off amongst the hierarchy of the commits that Oklahoma has landed to date?
You know, this is one of those ones you should have told me you were going to phrase it that way because now I got to pull up the entire list.
It's all good. I mean, you got Bo Bentley. That's probably easily number one.
Yeah, Bentley's going to be number one for me. I think Eberhart, without having the list in front of me, falls 3 to 5.
3 to 5. That's fair.
Versatility and fit into the scheme taken into account there. I think that he could be potentially not a cornerstone, but one of those pieces that sets Brent Venables' defense apart. You think of what Isaiah Simmons was to Clemson, because Isaiah Simmons was the ultimate unknown for Clemson. We had no idea where he was going to line up, whether he was going to be a nickel, whether he was going to be in that cheetah spot, whether he was going to be at safety, whether he was going to be a linebacker. That is something that because of his build and his skill set that I could see Jacob Eberhart doing. Now, this is without any inside knowledge of what they actually want to do with him, but if you watch the tape and you see all the things he can do, and you take into account his size like you just laid out, Parker, there is a lot of versatility and a lot of possibilities for the different things you can do with this dude.
Man, everything stacks up pretty nicely from an apprenticeship standpoint, doesn't it? Because Robert Spears-Jennings was class of 22.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's expected to be a program cornerstone this fall for Oklahoma at that safety position. Michael Boganowski was class of 24. He's going into his sophomore season. I think most everyone understands, A, he's going to see the field a lot this year, and B, come 2026, it's his show. And then Eberhart, as Boganowski is 2 years behind Spears-Jennings, he is 2 years behind Boganowski, which, by the way, there was a 405 listener that said, ran into Boganowski last night at Chipotle, and I think his burrito order was bigger than my head. Big Mike, did you hear that? I know you're listening. He'll love to hear that. His boy's getting big for football season. Yeah, I think that's ideally how you line it up, right? You land a big-time recruit that's going to be a big-time college player, you expect at least, every 2 years at a given position, and everything just kind of takes care of itself at this point, as long as your evals hit, as long as you have identified the right guys. And Robert Spears-Jennings was certainly one of the right guys. Brandon Hall had to fight for him early in his career at Oklahoma, too, because Robert Spears-Jennings signed in that 2022 class right when the new staff got to town, and Jeff Lebby wanted him to play wide receiver. Jeff Lebby really wanted him to play wide receiver. In fact, Jeff Lebby had recruited Robert Spears-Jennings at Ole Miss as a wide receiver. If not for the OU offer, there's a good chance he might have gone to Ole Miss and played wide out. Well, not for Jeff Lebby, but for somebody, for Lane Kiffin. Where was I going with that? Yeah, Robert Spears-Jennings, he was certainly, you can conclude at this point, that was a good eval by the Oklahoma staff. Could be a great eval. Could be regarded as a great eval, depending on what he does as a senior. Michael Boganowski, absolute headhunter. You saw encouraging flashes from him as a true freshman. You're going to see a lot more of him this fall as a sophomore. And then, hopefully, next season, assuming Eberhart, I go back and forth between the two. I don't actually know which one it is. I should figure that out. But assuming Eberhart picks Oklahoma, got Boganowski in that starting role next year, and Eberhart's starting to get his feet wet, just as Boganowski did last season. And will continue to this season.
There seems to be a succession plan.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always a good thing. A texter in the 703 says the difference between what is happening in other industries and college sports right now is in most other cases the endorsement or NIL deals aren't used to persuade someone to play/work for an organization. Parker, I think you might track with me on this one.
Okay.
Let me see. Let me see if you do. I'm cool with a salary cap on the pay for play. What you are directly paying to the players, I think I'm cool with. I don't know, but to cap somebody's endorsement deals, and especially to run them through an arbiter that determines whether or not this is good and fair, I think that is only something that is limited to the college world. And my whole feeling on this, I've said this a couple times this week, but I will reiterate it, and it's okay. I don't like creating a subsect of society with different rules just for this industry. Just let all of society's rules and how we do things as it pertains to that go on in the industry.
I mean, there's no solution that's going to satisfy everybody,
of
right?
course not.
And there's no solution that is perfect.
These are just my ideas.
Yeah. It's becoming increasingly clear there's no solution that is going to come without any holes, without any flies in the ointment, if you will. Recruiting Boomer on the text line, back to safety, says, Michael Boganowski is always going to live in my memories as the man who exposed the B word in that weenie tight end that transferred to LSU when he knocked him out in the spring game. Man, that's right. Josh Bates got up in Boganowski's face after that hit. You don't recall spring game 2024. What could be the last spring game ever played at Oklahoma? Even though I hope it's not. Man, Boganowski put the hurt on Bauer Sharp. Got a talking to from Josh Bates afterward. One of those guys is still here. One of the three. And it ain't Josh Bates or Bauer Sharp.
Mm-hmm.
A 405 listener says, Big Mike knows we talked about it last night. LOL. Dang, you got Big Mike on speed dial? It's a connected individual right there. I don't know who that is. They didn't drop their name. But dang. Big Mike Boganowski on speed dial. That's the way to live right there. It's a good dude. Junction City, Kansas's finest. All right, folks, that brings us to the end of another fine show and another fine week on Locked In. For Grayson Singleton, I am Parker Thune. Thanks so much for coming along for the ride with us this week. On the other side of the weekend, come Monday, You would presume that we will have a brand new Oklahoma commit to discuss in greater detail, that, of course, being Jacob Eberhart. Who knows? Maybe there'll be more legislative bombshells across the sport that spur 40-minute-long sidebars with the Knippelmeyer Chevrolet text line. Who's to say? But for this show, for this week, it's a wrap. The show, of course, brought to you by Dorsey Jones Buick GMC out in El Reno. Appreciate their partnership. Very much looking forward to the Friday installment of The Rush with Teddy Lehman and Tyler McComas. That comes your way next here on The Ref, the home of Sooner fans. Don't go anywhere. Grayson and I, we'll see you Monday.